Norfolk Business Show with Danny Snelling. Sponsored by MT Comms.
Okay, so Duncan, we have you in the studio. For those that don't know who you are you?
Well, Danny, look, it's wonderful to be. I haven't sat in the hot seat and been asked questions for a few months.
A month, is that all?
A few months, yeah. It used to happen quite a lot. But,
I imagine, yeah.
I was the local boy who in 2019, under the Boris wave, turned what was a Lib Dem seat in North Norfolk blue for the first time in nearly 20 years. And was something that I never dreamt of ever doing, but I became a Member of Parliament for my home, North Norfolk. 100 days later, we entered a pandemic, so it was a pretty tumultuous time.
It was.
And lost my seat last summer in the early hours of the 5th of July.
And therefore became unemployed, I guess.
Yeah, it's pretty brutal.
I can imagine. So, yes, clearly you were our North Norfolk MP, and I think one of the most known, certainly in Norfolk and the surrounding areas. And you certainly got a lot of mentions, got a lot of airtime, got a lot of publicity, and I think certainly in my circles were liked and respected, and certainly done a bloody good job.
Thank you.
So today we're going to just talk about past, present, and future, of course.
Yeah.
But perhaps if we start the ball rolling by where it all began, where you grew up, and what you got up to.
Yeah. Well,
even misspent youth is allowed in this environment, but I can't imagine there's much of that in your...
No, I think that's probably why I was able to get into Parliament. I never,
they vet you first, didn't they?
They do a lot of heavy
vetting.
I bet,
yeah, God,
yeah. There was no skeletons. But no, I mean, look, I grew up in Holt in North Norfolk. Genuinely, my stepfather was Michael Baker, who ran the CT Baker Group, or Bakers and Larners, as most people have heard of if they ever go shopping up on the North Norfolk coast.
Yeah,
and
very well known, isn't it? Yeah.
Wonderful business, absolutely wonderful business. And my father was an NHS dentist for all of his life. Anyway, I grew up in Holt, went to Gresham's, went off to university like everybody else. Parents got divorced in a pretty messy, acrimonious one in 1998. And I started training as an accountant after I graduated.
Well, you say like everyone else with the university thing. It's interesting because I know strictly you're not a business owner at the moment, anyway, and this is aimed at business owners. And almost everyone I've had sat in that chair so far has not been to university. I'm trying to see these patterns with the guests that I have in here.
Yeah.
So. Interesting that you did. What did you choose to do at university?
Well, I did business studies, and really because I suppose I'd grown up with business all around the table, stepfather running bakers, and I wanted a qualification, a profession. It wasn't my business. I was a stepson. And I suppose I came out of that sort of school way, and teachers, well, you're right, is that you then go on to university. So I totally get that some people don't. Hindsight now is lucky I did end up with a qualification, because being thrown out of Parliament, there's a lot of people that just have done nothing in their lives. They go through politics and they haven't got a skill to fall back on if the brutal reality of what happened to me happens. So anyway, I did go off to university, but Norfolk was always in my blood, and I came back here.
And which university was it?
So I was at Nottingham-Trent. Had a wonderful time. It was good for me. I got out of that public school mentality, went to sort of an ex-polytechnic in a big city, got away from Holt, so to speak, in the right ways, and met people from all different walks of life, and I loved, absolutely had a great time. Came back, started doing chartered accountancy, literally a few hundred yards from where I'm sitting now, and met my wife, who has been with me sort of ever since we met when we were both sort of 22 years old, Nina. And, that first day she met me, she would have never in a million years thought that, sort of 15, 20 years later, I'd end up being a public servant and in the government and that sort of thing. But then most people at school...
You didn't?
No. And mates I'm now reconnecting with, now that I'm back able to sort of form those friendships again, because Parliament, it sucks every bit of your
I
body
bet it
out of
does,
you.
yeah. Yeah.
I was saying, God, when we were at school, we'd have never ever thought you would turn out to be an MP. And I go, don't worry, guys, neither did I.
Yeah. Yeah, it was nice to see you back at Lunch Club a few months ago as well when you came back there, yeah.
Yeah, well, it's been great. I mean, listen, I haven't had time for anybody. I mean, my wife would say, you were in the room for 5 years, but you weren't with us.
Yeah.
And, it is like that. It takes absolutely every part of your being away from your family, your friends. You're connected to a phone at all times because, your 70,000 constituents at any one moment can be trying to get in touch with you. And the emails just don't stop. And I mean, I know that's the same for a lot of business owners, but I think you do put it on steroids when you're in public office because, Christmas Day, right the way through to, any holidays can be interrupted. Parliament can be recalled, as it was when the botched evacuation of Afghanistan happened a few years ago. We were away on holiday. You got to go back. So look, I wouldn't change it ever.
No,
it was the most incredible experience, but it takes a massive toll on your life. And you were kind enough to say that I was well thought of. I always like to come out of this thing, this incredible experience, and go, well, do you know what? I might not vote Tory, but he was a good lad, and I think that's basically the reputation I was very lucky to have.
Yeah. So before we get to that, you said you were an accountant. Was it working for a local firm, presumably?
Yeah. So qualified with Baker Tilly, who were in the Close back then, where we are now. Hopped across, all about 10 yards to Grant Thornton, which was a bigger firm. Did my first stint outside of practice with the EDP as an accountant there.
Archant money, yeah.
Archant back then.
Yeah.
And that was 2007 time. And C.T. Baker, Bakers and Lanas at that time, when my stepfather was still alive, was rapidly expanding. It bought some supermarkets. And I got a call that sort of said, well, we need to employ someone for the future. You're a chartered accountant. You can't just hand over businesses to the children necessarily these days if they've not got the skills to carry it on. Would you come work for us? So I did. And I had 13 years working at Baker's in Holt. And yeah, they were wonderful years. I absolutely love small businesses that grow into something that's bigger. It was a diversified. It's a Norfolk institution. It's up there with the likes of Gerald as a 250-year-old family business in the area, same as Roy's, and Michael, who died sadly just 5 months before I was elected, never got to see me get into Parliament, which is what he wanted to do himself. I know we'll be looking down, and we had some great times together. It was a diversified retailing business, a department store, builders.
Did you get much involvement in the day-to-day of it? Or?
Yeah, I mean, I was the finance director. He was the managing director, and we had a board of directors, and we had others that came and went, and there was never ever a dull moment. He was a complete guy who just would wake up in the morning, have an idea, and by the afternoon be carrying it out. And that is entrepreneurial spirit, and I miss that very much.
Yeah, but good times presumably, and I guess you got a bit of life back then, or at least a bit of normal life.
Yeah, I mean, genuinely. So I left, Norwich 2008, went off to work in North Norfolk, and day one. I went to leave the office at whatever it was, 5 o'clock back in those days, and he sort of was standing in the doorway and said, when you hit that light switch, you're not going home, you're going back out into the community, and you're going to go and help people around the town who've helped us with this business, because we're a community business. And you could have either said, well, sod off, I'm going home, or back to the wife, or you could go, yeah, okay, I want to give back. And that's what I did. So I joined, everything that was going, the Chamber of Trade, the local town council, Round Table, all these different organisations that I was part of in the town, real fabric of the town. But it was that small scale politics in, goodness me, I was 29, so it was back sort of 2009 time, where I fought my first election, and as a fresh-faced 29-year-old ended up on Holt Town Council. And the rest is history.
And at what point did you realise it could go somewhere, I guess?
Well, if we can talk about it again, Brexit. You can remember all those days in 2015, 2016 time, which amazing, 10 years ago now. And Michael, my stepfather, was a huge Brexiteer. He joined UKIP. He was a big fan of Nigel Farage, who's amazing the comeback he's now making. He's been, doesn't matter whether you like him or not, he's been the most influential figure in our politics for many, many years. And Michael roped me into helping him deliver leaflets. And then he went a bit further. He said, well, I'm going to put you down as a paper candidate, which means you don't have to do any work, but your name's on the ballot paper. I'm never doing that again, Danny. I didn't even deliver a leaflet in Stalham, let alone go into the town, and nearly won the county council election about it. So anyway, that happened. And then in 2015, I think it was, just before the Brexit referendum, I stood for district council under the UKIP banner. And the irony was that I lost, thank goodness, because had I have won, I would have probably never been allowed to be a Conservative MP. Anyway, I lost, and a guy called Michael Hill, who ran Picturecraft Gallery in Holt, another famous Holt family, he said to me, I think you should become the mayor of the town. I thought, what? I'm in my early to middle 30s. Most mayors of towns are in their 70s. Yeah. And he said, no, you've sat on this council table now for the last 5 years. You know what's going on, 5 or 6 years. You should run and become mayor. So I did. I got rid of the existing mayor. Call it a hostile takeover. No, we did actually do a proper job and made sure we did it amicably, which interestingly, he was one of my dad's best friends. In his 70s, lovely man, Brian Payne. And I became, I think, one of the youngest mayors in Norfolk. And it was really from that point that I got known. I found I was good at dealing with people, being able to talk to people, reason with them. Come on, let's get through this disagreement that we've got. Because most politics is often about a disagreement. Yeah. And I became a district councillor in 2017 because I rather upset Michael by walking into his office and saying, look, Brexit's happened. I want to join a sensible, grown-up party. I don't want to be part of UKIP anymore. And he was a bit upset about that. But I became a Conservative, won district council by-election, became group, became the finance and portfolio holder for a short period of time, so quite a responsible job setting council tax, and carried on winning elections.
But throughout all this time, you were still full-time
Still finance director at Baker's, which I think was beginning to upset the family because obviously I was not in the business very much. But, the honest answer to that is I was getting all my fulfillment by doing public service. Yeah. And I knew nothing about Westminster and Parliament. I mean, genuinely, there are people who spend an entire lifetime trying to become an MP.
Most do, I'm sure.
They do. Yeah. I wasn't one of those people. I was very lucky, very humbled by it. I was in the right place at the right time. And people that knew me said, you've got what it takes to be an MP. And I can still remember.
Are these people that knew you very well then? Or?
Yeah. I mean, I can remember where I was. I can remember taking the telephone call. It's funny what you remember. And it was the town clerk of Holt Town Council. I'd been mayor. I'd stepped down. And she rang me and the conversation went something along the lines of, if I had £1 for every person that walks into the mayor's office, I'd be a rich woman because everybody says one day you'll take over from Sir Norman Lamb. And I just said, what? I don't think of myself like that. It's not why I do this. I've got a job that I like doing. And she said, everyone says it. And I admit I went home that night. I said to Nina, I've had this conversation. I've never thought about it before. But what about it? What about running for Parliament, becoming the MP of your home? That's special. Not many people get to do that. And she said, darling, I will always back whatever you choose to do in life. And I said, okay, if I win, it will change our lives. It just does. And she said, you only live once. And I went for it. I went through all the selection process. The Conservative Party basically said to me, well, you have to go and fight a no-hope seat of winning, go and fight somewhere up in Liverpool, you've got no chance of winning up there, and, cut your teeth. And I said, I'm not doing that. I will stand in North Norfolk or not at all. I don't care about any other part of the country other than my home of Norfolk. And so they gave me a sort of special exemption, which meant you could only stand in North Norfolk. And on the day, you have this bit like an interview process. You get selected. They go through your background. There's nothing you've said that's naughty or whatever. And then you have, lists of people that you have to compete against. Captains of industry, people who've led big charities, people who've been political all their lives, etc., etc. And I was the common or garden local potato, which probably everyone thought's got no chance of winning. But that was my advantage, that everybody said, well, we don't want someone that's got no affinity to their home. We want him. He knows it like the back of his hand. Everybody knows who he is. He's a local man. He's had a career before Parliament. This is what we want. We don't want some Westminster type to walk into North Norfolk. And I got selected on the 1st of February 2019.
When you say selected, who was that by? And what I'm trying to understand really is, and it's a good thing we do it like this, but why can't popular people, for instance, celebrities or pop stars, enter that seat? And how are we protected from those?
Well, you can. If you wanted to do it, you could. You would join your local political association. You'd go out campaigning and helping those people. You'd go through, if you wanted to become a Labour MP, exactly the same process. You would go through the selection process with the party headquarters, and then you choose a seat, and then that local association that runs that constituency seat would then select you. And that's exactly what happened to me. And I was just fortunate enough that through each of the heats and the rounds, I kept getting picked.
But who are voting on it? Is it the committee or
local members?
Yeah.
So every constituency has an association. So where do you live?
Old Catton,
right. So that area of Norwich, I think it's Norwich North, isn't it? Because my aunt lives in Old Catton. Chloe Smith's old seat, they've got an association, and it would be the members of that association that pick you, they vote for you. So in my case, it was the North Norfolk Association, and they picked me. And my dad was still alive at that time. So I went to see him. He knew I was going through the selection process. I went to see him and sat down with him one evening. I said, listen, I've been selected to run for the seat of North Norfolk at the next general election. And he said, you're mad? And I said, well, you can't have too much of a go at me because you've tried to do it yourself. And he said two things I remember. He said one was that if you lose your job, you'll be out of a job. And I said, yes. I said, I better not lose then, had I? And the other thing he said, which I always find very moving, is he said the children will suffer. And that's very special to me, because he wasn't my biological father yet. He cared about the children enough. He treated them like his own. So that was very good of him. And he then had a heart attack on Good Friday, and he died 6 weeks later.
Oh my goodness! Yeah.
And my maiden speech in Parliament was, you basically thank your predecessor, and you thank the people that had set you on that path of Westminster, and your friends and your colleagues all sort of sit round you, a bit of a donut as it is, and my children were watching, and in the gallery, which was a lovely moment, and there wasn't a dry eye in the house, because people knew that the inspiration for me to go into Parliament was my stepfather, who had died just before I got there. So it was really moving.
Yeah, I bet. One of the questions I've got for you is, what was your proudest moment? But I'm sure that was up there, wasn't it?
Yeah, I think, to represent your home in Westminster, something I never thought I would ever do, has got to be probably my proudest achievement. And over the 5 year, don't forget it was 100 days in that Boris shut the country down and we went into a global pandemic, and all the stuff that we remember, the Ukraine conflict starting, and Boris and Liz and Rishi, the revolving door of prime ministers, which was all very, I personally find pretty embarrassing. I was there. I was in that soap opera, and that, as a local boy from Norfolk, was just incredible.
Yeah. So I don't know whether we can skip forward to that, or if there's, what was day to day like before all that? Before that shit hit the fan, for want of a better scenario. But what was it like? Just living a day in the life of a local MP.
Well, the first 100 days were sort of pretty normal, and then there weren't many normal days after that.
No.
So the first 100 days before we went into lockdown, you literally, you get a letter that says, congratulations, you won the general election. I had to resign from work. That was, pretty difficult conversation.
Yeah.
I've won. And of course, no one was expecting the snap election. You don't remember Boris called it.
That's right, yeah.
Boris called it, and we went to a general election just before Christmas in 2019. So literally, you just get a letter that says, report to Westminster at 6:30 in the morning, you'll collect your computer. And there's no HR department, there's no training for this. Every MP is like a self-employed person. You basically sink or swim. You've got nowhere to live. It's for me, who didn't know what they were doing, it was pretty intense. So I arrived on day one with nowhere to live. They give you a hotel for a fortnight, no office. I had no constituency office because I'd won off a Liberal Democrat, so I didn't inherit Norman's office. No staff, and suddenly thousands of emails start pouring into you each day because you've got a publicly available email address, and get on with it. So the Whip's office gives you some basic training, but it's very much, you are a self-employed person and you start to basically work out how you do things yourself. And then all the routine of select committee selections, how to speak in the chamber. I had no idea what all the conventions were, how I address the speaker, when you stand up, how you speak. I'd had lines written, but you want to do it off the cuff, learn, and you're just terrified that if you make a mistake, you don't want to become a meme or a global sensation on YouTube, because you've messed up.
Yeah.
So all that stuff takes a bit of time.
Just drilling into the self-employment bit of it, how is that set up? How is that? Are you paid? Do you invoice? I don't know.
Yeah, so you IPSA, the Independent Parliamentary Standards Board, effectively,
right.
They look after you, and so you get a pay slip every single month in that regard. So not quite the same as self-employment, but you know what I'm saying. And then you get an allowance of costs to run your office and employ staff. So renting an office, finding somewhere to live in London, you have an allowance for all of that, and then you have an allowance to run a staff team. And most MPs' offices are running 6 or 7 staff. It's quite a big operation with the amount of emails you're getting, casework with people in distress who need help, somebody doing your social media and your marketing.
And presumably, like you said, it's not like you're taking over an existing office with all those processes in place. No, you're literally there from scratch, aren't you?
I was inheriting cases from Sir Norman Lamb, when he stepped down, so cases that he hadn't finished that were still going on. So you're picking up those issues. And so, and of course, everything else, you're away from home. You're learning to get on with life away from what you've been used to. So, those first few months were pretty hairy. And I prided myself on taking a very, very direct role with my constituents. So I would be answering a lot of the emails myself, which people think is ridiculous. Don't you have just a team to do that? I said, no, because they don't know how I want to hold that constituent.
And how you want to answer it.
Yeah. So it takes time. And then, as I say, 100 days in, Boris stands up and says we're going into lockdown. And then, I mean, that was, as an MP, we were in the government. Don't forget, there's a big difference between the opposition and who's in government. Mm-hmm. As the Labour Party are finding today, much harder when you're in charge, having to make the decisions. We did it for 14 years, and they picked holes in us. They've been doing it for 6-7 months.
So, at what point, talking about the pandemic now, at what point did you, were you in any sort of know before the general pop, what happened? Talk me through that early stage of it.
Yeah, so if you're in the government, as we obviously were, the government party, you may get a little bit of a sense of what's going on, maybe hours before others. But we are talking about hours. MPs don't have special privileged access. We don't get told that, tonight we're going to be launching some missiles at the Russians or whatever, because basically, as you're seeing, in every parliamentary party, nobody can keep their mouth shut.
No.
There's absolutely no trust whatsoever. It is, I thought, wow, we'd know everything that's going on, but we don't, because people open their mouths and they brief the media. So we don't get information beforehand, really. Sometimes we do, and I'll talk about it in a moment with the vaccines. I had a private conversation with Matt Hancock, and he said, "Don't brief the media, but we do think that we have found a vaccine that works." We knew 5 months before most people knew, but in terms of the pandemic, we were sort of beginning to be briefed that afternoon that Boris was going to say something at 6 o'clock, and then Westminster just becomes a massive chattering village of what the heck's going to happen. But no, generally speaking, you don't really get information ahead of the general population, and the media probably find out before the MPs do.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So let's talk about February, March. That year.
Yeah.
What happened? Who called you? What?
So the 1922 committee, which I'm sure lots of people have heard of, that exists. The parliamentary party is called into that room, and the chairman of the 1922 committee will invite the Prime Minister in, and he'll brief the MPs. I think that's pretty much what happened. And Boris then jumps up and at 6 o'clock made an announcement to the nation. I can remember two things from that evening. The two things were, number one, Jerome Mayhew, who just held on to his seat, a fantastic man, the MP for Broadland. His father was Northern Ireland Secretary for many years, so he's extremely experienced, very capable MP, and lived a bit. He took me on one side, and I can remember we were standing in Old Palace Yard underneath Big Ben in the moonlight. And he looked at me and he said, whatever happens across the globe with this news about this, we didn't know really what it was at that time, this coronavirus. He said, we'll lose the next election. I always remember him saying that. And he said, it will be Winston Churchill all over again, won the Second World War, lost the election. No matter what we do, people will hurt. People will be suffering, and we will get the blame for it. And, I think his words were very wise. I think actually...
I'm sorry, just to interject, but I've heard you tell the story before, and just to remind you, we can swear on here. So I just thought I'd get that point in, so it's not... it's an adult show.
So no, so I thought, shit.
There you go.
So that was terrifying, but very wise, sensible words. And then I remember going back to my office, and the sheer panic from, as I say, 72,000 people that you represent, where your inbox, the emails are just flowing in, and people just going, help, what do I do? And I think that was a turning point where people did literally turn and look at the government and their MPs and go, help us. We don't know. You guys are making the rules literally as you go each day. What the heck are we going to do for money, for support? What can we allowed out of our homes? You know, the spotlight on us making decisions was enormous.
Yeah, I think, you know, obviously everyone's going to blame the government for everything, and of course, you know, so they should. I guess they were in charge, but I think it's very, very easy to forget all the things they've done so well and so right. You know, certainly Boris or whoever told him to do it, but just that, you know, constant updating of information was probably the best thing they ever done, because that's all people really wanted. They wanted to be, they wanted to know what's going on. They wanted to be kept appraised, you know, appraised of the situation. They wanted that constant, not necessarily reassurance, because it wasn't reassurance, was it? It was more just the information, you know, and they wanted something.
Yeah.
So I really do think there's a lot that they done so well that is now forgotten, and perhaps wasn't done so well in other countries, or would have been done so well by other parties.
Yeah, I mean, I totally agree with you. I mean, actually, when you think about the numbers of vaccinations that we got into people's arms so they were safe, the numbers of people that lost their businesses, or people that are actually looked after financially, you know, most people got vaccinated, they didn't go bankrupt, their businesses were saved, and actually we did a pretty good job over it all. I think it's all the stuff that sort of came afterwards, and all the Partygate things, which, you know, of course, probably not time to go into today, but rocked the
I don't know. I was going to ask you if you were in on those parties.
No, I wasn't.
I know that. But no, I mean, you know, from those times, is there a real standout one, other than, I assume, the day it was, you know, lockdown was mentioned, you know, is there any real memorable time, standout time from the whole pandemic as a whole?
Yeah. So look, why do you go and do that job? Why do you go and be an MP? The amount of people say to me, "Oh, Danny, I could, you know, Duncan, I would never in a million years, I couldn't do your job for all the tea in China." And I say, well, you could if you're built like most people. You know, most people get an incredible buzz out of helping other people. That's why I did it. I loved the ability to help people. I got an enormous kick out of being able to say, I'm really, really pleased to be able to support and help you. I want to give back. And there's one story, I remember this, I remember where I was when I got the email, and it was the first week I was elected. A young man who was at the UEA, he was trained to be a doctor at the med school, and the hospital pulled his final year of funding in his medical, I guess he was, you know, qualifying to be a doctor. And he said, I'm not from a wealthy family, I don't have the money, my parents don't have it, and I will not qualify as a doctor if I don't get this funding. It's just one more year, like £10,000 or something. And will you help me get that funding? Run the hospital, etc. No, we can't do it. So I got on my high horse, you know, lobbied whoever it was back at the time, say, look, for goodness sake, help this young man. This is crazy. All he needs is his £10,000 bursary and he'll finish his med school place. And cut a long story short, they managed to find the money and he got it and he went on and qualified. And about 3 years later, I got a Christmas card from him and his mum and dad separately. And I read this Christmas card and it said in it, you know, Dear Duncan, I'll never forget what you did for me when you fought for me to get that final school. I qualified as a doctor. During COVID, I was on the respiratory ward at the Norfolk in Norwich. I literally saved hundreds of people's lives from dying of COVID. And if it hadn't been for you helping me get that money, I wouldn't have qualified and helped save those people's lives. I can't thank you enough. And, you know, okay, to me, that made the whole job worthwhile, because that one person you helped, and look what they went on to do. And I'm,
absolutely,
you know, proud of being able to do that.
Is there any mistakes you made, do you think, or anything along the way you perhaps would have done differently, or maybe learnt from?
Yeah, shouldn't have got rid of Boris.
Well, yeah.
Simple as that.
You didn't get rid of him, but any mistakes you made? I mean, you know, you personally, I don't know.
Yeah, I did make mistakes. I think the problem is you're going so fast every single day, there just isn't space to think. and sometimes I probably followed the party line more than I perhaps should have done.
Well, I guess that is something comes with experience and knowing how far you can
definitely
push those lines.
definitely.
I guess,
But you do that because you're a team, and I'm a team player, and so no, there weren't many things I thought I got really badly wrong. I think I worked hard and did a good job and have a good reputation. Ultimately, I've ended up getting a job post Parliament, which a lot of my colleagues still 6 months down the line are still struggling. So I, not too bad in that regards. Yeah. So no, I'm proud of what I achieved, but I think the sacrifice of not winning and the position it puts you in life is quite tricky. I think, I went into it very naively, thinking that Norfolk's of safe.
I don't think you're going to ever have a true understanding of what it involves, are you?
Yeah.
There's no way you can be prepared for that.
Yeah.
So I guess we've touched on biggest challenges, memorable times, mistakes. Is there anything that you think could be done better for future people put in your position? I don't know, maybe it's part of that onboarding process, or maybe...
Yeah. I think it's the life after politics is probably the toughest thing.
A bit like footballers, I guess,
Yeah.
isn't it? anyone in that limelight, I guess.
I mean, all joking aside, there's a bit of truth in that, because you do come out of it, and it is very brutal. I mean, I got the call I'll never forget it, Danny, 1:17 in the morning, and you pick up the phone, and my agent, who was at the Count, North Walsham Sports Centre, said, "You've not done it. You're down 3% on every table, which is not a lot." And you suddenly think, oh my God. And you can't really have a bit of a cry because, you got a man up.
How long exactly had you done it for, since you quit?
4.5 years. Yeah, 4.5 years. So you've got to pick yourself up and you've got to get cracking. And I've got a family, 2 little girls, 9 and 13. And there's a choice there, Danny. Do I sit there and wallow for the next 5 years and go out knocking on doors and delivering leaflets on the hope that maybe I'll get back in again in 5 years? Or do I pick myself up and get back out there, go and... I needed a job. I needed to earn some money.
Had you have chosen that route and continue trying to get in next time, is there anyone paying you for that, or is there
no? I mean, this is it. And it's not just me that loses. It's all my staff as well. So they all are made redundant as well.
Yeah.
And yes, all right, you get a little bit of gardening leave pay. You get a sort of parachute payment to see you through, but that only lasts 4 or 5 months. And for me, that night when I lost, I was on the phone to friends, colleagues, acquaintances, people who I had worked hard to help, to say, will you help me? And, people were amazing. The amount of people came back to me and said, yeah, we'll not, it doesn't always work. It's not the right role, but we'll help you get by. And, so look, I am extremely blessed to be able, humbled really, to be back on my feet working as quickly and with a good job and some non-exec directorships. Really, really grateful for those who've helped me. But I'm not afraid to admit to you, and I think blokes don't talk enough about this, I went and got some help in the summer. I sat on the bed one August morning, Sunday morning, and just started weeping. And my wife said, I can't help you. She's wonderful. Absolutely everything about her is wonderful, but she's not a psychologist. And she said, I can't help you, Duncan. You need to go and see someone. And I just said, I feel useless. Everywhere I went in North Norfolk, people would stop me in the street. Thank you for helping my friend, or thank you for can you help me with this issue I've got? And then suddenly you're stripped of having that ability to help people the same way. So your identity, who you are, everything about you, bang, gone overnight.
It's very easy for you to say that's what you think it is, but I think from anyone that from outside of that environment doesn't think of it as being
Yeah.
anywhere near that
Yeah.
that bad, especially with your previous background and all the experience you've got.
Yeah.
I think anyone looking from afar, certainly me, be Christ,
Yeah.
I could think of 100 people who give you a job in a heartbeat. So,
Yeah.
but equally, I'm sure in your shoes, and perhaps looking back now, you can see how
Yeah.
you shouldn't have got
No,
beat yourself up so much on that.
No,
I
and
think,
you're absolutely right. And that's what the psychologist said. Exactly the same thing. Said, no, Duncan, that's in your own mind that this has happened.
Yeah.
You know, people don't think any less of you or different of you because you didn't win. You're still all who you are, and those people you supported and helped will still have that special place that they're grateful for what you did or that you helped them. It's only you that feel that you've had it all taken away from you. And she was right, and she was wonderful, and ultimately she was right. And I just needed a few hours in front of someone just to basically get it all out. And listen, as I said, I don't wallow in it. I don't have any negative thoughts about it. I love the fact that I did it. But it is difficult when you lose that role.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
So come on, let's move on to what you're doing now, or maybe there was a period in between that, wasn't there? So what did you then do? Well, after you'd rang everyone you knew.
Yeah. Well, look, true story. I went back into Parliament the Thursday after the Friday that I lost, and I went in with my little girl, who was particularly upset that I'd lost because she said the breakfasts in Parliament were the best breakfasts in the world. And she said, Daddy, we're not going to get these breakfasts anymore, are we? And anyway, I went in and I bumped into a few colleagues, George Freeman, for instance, gave me a big hug, housemates I'd lived with, other MPs I'd lived with, who had been lucky enough to win. And big hugs, and just said, look, mate, you don't want to be here. It's miserable. It's horrible. There's all these Labour MPs walking around and they don't know what they're doing. And anyway, I was driving home and chatting away to my 9-year-old when I got a call, and it was from a chap who ran a financial advisory firm in North Norfolk. And he said, listen, I've been where you've been, lost my job, got back up on my feet, run a really successful financial advisory firm, and you are a qualified chartered accountant. Everybody knows you. You can talk to people. You put those three things together, you'd make a fantastic wealth manager, financial planner. You'd be helping people again in the most important part of their life, which is probably, when are they going to retire? Have they got enough to retire? And are you managing their wealth properly? And I don't care whether it's Mrs. Miggins on a state pension or whether it's a multi-millionaire. To me, he didn't care whether it was that person in Parliament, and it doesn't matter now. If I can help those people, probably that lady on her state pension needs it more than anybody else, then I'll be back to giving back again. So, I said to this guy, what are you doing in the morning? And he said, not a lot. I said, let's have breakfast. And it went from there. So straight away, now, he told me he said, the career is fantastic. A lot of people who are a little bit older in life, I'm 45, so not completely older in life, go into this as a career. You've got a massive head start because of, being a chartered accountant. And I didn't know what I wanted to do, Danny. I really didn't. I didn't know whether I was going to go into the charity sector because I was known for doing a lot of charitable work with all my running, whether I go into the sort of utility sector, public companies, that sort of, because I did an awful lot on environmental work, or just straight back into accountancy. But it's hard when you've been out of accountancy for 4 or 5 years. You're a bit out of date with all the regulations. And I thought, well, I left that. Did I directly want to go back into that again? I wasn't sure what I wanted. But I was quite turned on with this conversation with this guy saying you'll be able to help people, you'll get the ability to go out there and give people advice. And I thought, well, actually, it's not a million miles different to what I have been doing. So cue conversations with lots of wealth management firms. I knew I wanted to be in Norwich, or Norfolk. I didn't necessarily want to be back in North Norfolk because I thought it'd be quite hard walking down the street in Cromer and people stopping you. I just wanted to have a bit of a break from that. as lovely as that is,
Just that separation.
yeah, I thought it'd be quite nice to be away from that, to be a little bit more anonymous. And so I ended up going off to see lots of people, but Alan Boswell. And didn't really know him. I didn't know a huge amount about the firm, although friends of mine had said, go and talk to him. And immediately, there's a reason he's an extremely successful man. You can tell that from the moment you meet him. He had energy, he had passion, he was interested. First thing he said was, are you going to go back into politics? And we got on really well. And we just had a conversation. And I thought, straight away,
But at the time, he knew you were perhaps interested in that walk of life.
Yeah. He knew who I was.
Yeah.
He'd never employed an MP before, as he told me.
But did he contact you, or did you?
No, I had a friend of mine who I knew there, who basically linked us up together. And
And the friend presumably knew you were looking to get into that.
So come and talk to us. Yeah, come and talk to us. So look, it just went from there. Conversation. I mean, that's Norfolk, isn't it?
Absolutely, yeah.
Do you put your CV in and be anonymous, or does somebody know somebody know somebody? And it all went from there. He immediately sort of got me. I got him, and I thought, they do an incredible amount of good in the local community. Alan Boswell, his charitable trust, does huge amounts, massively involved in supporting local sports clubs, not just Norwich City, but lots of other clubs as well. And it was an owner-managed, even though it's as big as it is, he still owns the business, walks the floor every day. It wasn't being sold off to some anonymous sort of, PE-backed firm. It was his company, and I thought, independently owned company, and all those things, wanting to be in Norfolk, ticked my box. And he has been extremely good to me, and along with the other owners of the financial services business. And I think, day one, you're just back on the normal job. It's everyone's thinking, who's this weird chap who used to be an MP? But you just have to roll your sleeves up, get on with it. And I'm having to take professional exams because I want to be qualified.
How are we getting on with those? And I know last time we spoke, you were sort of it's still work in progress.
Yeah, doing all right. I'm 3 down and 3 to go, so I'm really, I've only been there 3 months, so that's pretty good going in a way. But I wanted to do that to be able to say to him, thank you for offering me the job. I want to prove myself to you. I'm not going to let you down. And on Christmas Day, I'm up at 7 o'clock doing some revision before the kids get to open their Christmas presents, because I wanted to pass the next exam. So look, I'm giving it everything I can.
Yeah, and what sort of what things have you been getting up to in the interim, other than studying, of course?
Okay,
are you able to sell, or are you not? Is that classed as advice at the moment?
Really good question. So obviously the group is big enough. Alan Boswell is the largest independently owned insurance brokerage in the country. Isn't that proud that they're in Norwich? And then 20% of the business is financial services.
I've got a bit of an ongoing joke with a very good mate of mine, Adam Revel, who we both know.
Nice
I've known him for probably 15 years, and for the last, 10, 15 years, I always thought he was insurance. So I introduced him to people. He's Alan Boswell Insurance.
So no, he's a lovely chap. So he's but what they've got me doing is sort of pretty much being able to work across the group. I'm not an insurance broker, but lots of people who you can introduce them to, and everybody needs insurance. So it's actually quite nice to be able to go and see your friends and say, look, just let's have a look at it. Trust me, if I can help you, and everyone wants to be competitive today, and we can ensure that you haven't got any holes in the cover, or we can do a good deal, let's do it. So I enjoy that aspect of it. And then obviously the qualification, because it's all FCA regulated now. Hopefully I'll get later this year. And at the moment, again, lots of friends, contacts, etc., that I can bring in, sit in on the meetings and help them, but I can't give the regulated advice. And that's fine, because listen, as an MP, you have a thirst for knowledge and learning, and you never stop learning. And at the moment, I'm in that honeymoon period of just loving learning. about. Well, what I think financial advice is probably one of the most important things that we don't teach at school.
Oh, so true. Yeah. I don't know if you know Robert Whitwood. Do you come across that name? Inspired Youth. Unfortunately, he's in ill health at the moment, but spoke to him yesterday and he's on the mend. But his whole mission in life was to get kids more education about life, business, money from schools. And he's North Norfolk lad as well. But he, a big shout out to you, mate. If you are listening, I know he's.
Let's hook us up together.
He's taking some time out at the minute due to ill health, but he's spent the last 15 years pushing this message that we don't teach kids enough about life and that whole. I mean, I'd like to think my two are slightly different because I've sort of drilled it into them just about finance and money and everything else. But I remember every parents' evening. Having arguments with every teacher. Well, he doesn't even know what a direct debit is, and there's all these things that they just don't teach them.
And it's getting worse because these days we all go and pay with our Apple Watch or a card. We don't have cash on us. We don't learn to count. So my children, I can see it with them. They just go and tap their Go Henry card. They don't actually sit there with the money that you count out and then go and pay for something. We
were talking earlier about how I've been noticing these trends in people who are sat in that chair, and one of them is starting work early. Certainly, a lot of the guests so far have started very early, and myself included. And I always remember, because my dad was North Walsham. He had a chip shop in North Walsham by the tower there. And I used to go and work in there every Saturday morning from when I was like 7 years old. But I would always have the money in my pig room with all my friends. And I always remember he even allowed me to buy a Walkman, which I really wanted on finance, obviously through him. And it was this crazy, amazing sort of gadget at the time, and it was, and I was way too young to probably have something like that. But it was
taught you the value of money.
It was a valuable lesson.
Totally right. I mean, I can remember, I started sweeping the floor at Baker's when I was 10 years old, a broom in my hand, and £1 an hour, 50p went in my building society, and 50p I could keep. And taught me the value of money.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Was there ever a point in between, certainly after you lost the election, but was there a point where you thought I could set up my own firm, maybe accountancy or IFA even?
Yeah, look, I suppose what I went through was, such a sort of psychological shock to the system. That the one thing I was craving more than anything, Danny, was security.
No, I get that.
You just lost everything, so you thought. So I wanted security, and that's really tough. If you're a child today, like my children, what are they going to do in life? What can they do as a career that will last them 40 years till retirement? There's not much out there.
That's true.
I thought I'd be a retailer on the high street. Well, the high street isn't exactly a safe place anymore. So for me, this offer of financial advice, insurance, Alan Boswell, etc., the whole thing, I thought, what, that is a career, that is security, that is something that AI is not going to replace. People will always need people to help with those services. So there was a lot of that in me. A lot of my friends, yes, have opened consultancies, doing sort of political consultancy work, that sort of thing. That wasn't really me. I never did this from a political angle.
An accountancy though?
Well, you're out of practice for a few years. That's the big problem.
I guess
it's a very technical role, and you've got to be up on all the standards. And I basically put the books back on the shelf for the last 5 years. Hadn't done it. So this was a great opportunity, a once in a lifetime opportunity to pivot. And so I was able to sort of pivot and go, well, I'll use all that financial training I've got all that people skills, I've got that, the people across 400 square miles of Norfolk, and actually let's go and do something that I'd always been interested in, and that's kind of how it all happened.
Great stuff. Well, I think, unless you've got any massive more to add, that almost wraps us up. But I mean, one thing I always like to ask every guest is, who can we get you connected with, or if you can't be specific, perhaps, who would be a good person to sit and have a coffee with from our listeners. And it might be someone listening, or it might be ask our listeners to find someone like that. But have you got anyone in mind that you'd love to, get a coffee with, be it for business purposes, personal, whatever you like?
Look, I haven't been in Norwich for nearly 20 years. So I am loving getting back acquainted with people that I haven't seen for 20 years. So I think probably, have a bit of belief. Old dogs can learn new tricks. And if you're someone out there who thinks, you know what, I don't know if I can retire, or I don't know anything about pensions, or what, give me a shout. And for a person that is passionate, trying to have another go and start a new career, let me have a one-to-one confidential chat with you, because I can put you in touch with the right sort of person. And you never know, it might lead to some of the best decisions you've ever made.
And how far off, so another question coming at you now, but how far are you off being able to give the advice and the...
If I pass the next 2 exams, I then have the final one to sit, and that only sits at certain times of the year, and that's in early October. So I am hoping by this Christmas I'm done, which would be an amazing year to look back on and go, last year I lobbed out of Parliament, this year you've qualified as a financial advisor. I would be made up to be able to do that. And so it's a big ask, but look, I thought that set yourself a target in life. You're never too old to learn new things, and I'm loving the journey.
Actually, I'm not going to wrap up here because I've thought of some other stuff. Charity work. Obviously, you've done so much for charity over the last, since I've known you. But what are you doing now? Anything for charity at the moment? I know you've sat on.
I've properly fallen off the wagon, if I'm honest, because last April I ran back-to-back marathons in a week and raised and broke 120,000 for local charities.
Hang on, let's just not skip over that statement. Back-to-back marathons. I mean, how many and how spaced out? And
so look, very quickly, in lockdown, wife's jumping up in front of the TV, doing these Joe Wicks things. I'm pretty out of shape, laughing at her, going, God, look at you. And she said, well, why don't you do the same? And I said, I'm not jumping up and down in front of the TV in my leotard to Joe Wicks. A mate of mine in Parliament, who was Theresa May's private secretary, said all MPs get an entry to the London Marathon. Just pay your entrance fee and you're in, rather than going through the public ballot. So I said, okay, I'll do it. And I was really nervous. I'd never done any running since school. Certainly didn't have a marathon in me. And so in 2021, ran the London Marathon, raised 38,000.
Wow.
2022 ran the London Marathon, raised, I think that one was 46,000. I had a year off in 23 because I had an eye operation, and the pounding on the road for 26 miles, the doctor said you need that to recover. So I then ran it in 24. But did 2 in a week. So I did London on the 21st of April, the Norfolk Marathon on the 28th. And on my back, I had a big target poster that said, if I do it, I want to raise over 100,000 on the accumulation. I came in, and after all the money was counted, raised 120,000.
Wow.
And again, listen, why did I do it? I did it because I had a privileged platform for 4.5 years. People loved the idea that every mile you completed, they'd give you I'd give £1,000 for local charity. As it was much more than £1,000. I didn't like picking the big charities because, frankly, they would be sustainable and they could perhaps raise money. I liked looking after the little charities, the ones which, after the pandemic, would perhaps go bust. The little village halls, things like that, if they didn't have some help. So, 120 grand and 80 odd charities benefited from all that running.
80?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. So it was lovely. And every time I finished, my feet are still recovering now, my toenails, from April. It just wrecks your feet forever. But since starting work and commuting into work each morning from North Norfolk and picking the kids up, because you've now got to actually be a dad again, and doing this study in the evenings, like my wife said, you just can't. You're going to have to give up.
Something's got to give, hasn't it?
So I'm having a break from running, but never say never. If I can get back to raising money for charities again, I will.
Yeah. Well, Duncan, it's been a pleasure. Thanks for coming on, mate.
Thank you. Lovely to talk to you. Thank you for the opportunity. No problem.
The Norfolk Business Show with Danny Snelling. Sponsored by MT Comms.